Kim. Turn the other way.
Yes.
It's not very flattering.
I am ready whenever you are.
Okay.
I'm rolling. You want this rolling the whole time?
Sure. Yeah, that's a camera over there too. Just
Now that is neat.
so. That's yours, isn't it?
That's the stations.
Oh, okay.
Well,
He's
that
real good
is
at
a
stuff
neat little
like that.
thing.
Yeah.
We need one of those, King K.
All right, it's rolling.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
Huh?
You're good to go.
Okay.
And obviously
So-
this is just, like if I mess up, I can go, and start it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we're not live. Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. So I guess the first question is, how are you? I mean, we've just had this wonderful conversation, but how are you?
I know, we need the cameras rolling whenever, like,
When we didn't know,
Yeah,
we were
when
just
we were
chatting.
just
Yeah, now the
chatting.
pressure's on.
but when I answer, you just want me to answer your question directly.
So, how are you?
Well, that's good. So that's
How is life for you
how
these
are you?
days?
It's like life is very, very good. Things are going very well. Personally, they're going well. The children are doing great, and the business is doing very well. So everything, you have the normal little life hiccups, but everything is
Right.
going very well.
And we know the story about, your case, and you decided to become, an attorney and represent people who, were in your situation. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to talk about in the times that we've spoken until now, you were all over the place. You were all, you're in Idaho, and you're in Jacksonville, Florida, and then you're in Pennsylvania and Ohio and California. And how many states, how many clients, how does that all, how do you get your clients? Does your name precede you?
I guess because there's no budget for advertising, so they just Google. Like I've had somebody call me from California that had gotten arrested, said they were falsely accused while they were in there. They found my book in the jail library, and so they called their family members and said, "You need to call this person." So a lot of people, they do what I did, is they'll Google, falsely accused or, wrongly accused of, And so then they, once they Google that, they just find you. I mean, so some people come up on, like they'll go on YouTube. Some people come up on some of the things that are posted on YouTube. Some of them will find the book. They'll put in accused and the book will pop up. Some of them will just Google falsely accused and then either my story will pop up or my website, and then they reach out to me. So to date, I've probably worked in close to 35, 36 states so far. So right now, I'm in about 8 different states right now working. But we only do take so many cases because I'm not going to take more than what we can handle, because that's one of the very frustrating things with attorneys that I had to fire was, you hear what you want to hear, and then the work isn't done, they're not responsive, they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and then, and they just take on too many cases. I've even had a few attorneys that said, my caseload is just so high. I said, well, that's your choice.
Right.
Say no.
Yeah. And so your first case after you passed the bar and, you're ready to go, what was your first case?
Well, okay, so I have 2 answers to that.
Okay.
My very first case, because I consulted on these types of cases as soon as my case was over.
Right.
I started getting phone calls and people reaching out to me days after the verdict in my case. So I consulted all the way up until pre-law school, through law school, and after law school until I passed the bar. So I will never forget, it was probably a week after my trial. And at that point, there was a lot of kind of, I know I went to New York for Good Morning America, went to Larry King in California. We're traveling, I was traveling a little bit, and I get a phone call from this individual that says, hey, my son needs your help. We saw your story. Please help him. And it was a Florida case. And so I ended up consulting on that case and working with an attorney down in Florida, and that one ended up in a judgment of acquittal. And that was very abnormal for that to happen. But 2, it was very involved. So I automatically jumped in, worked with the attorney, started doing basically everything that the attorney does other than speak in court. So that's kind of what the consulting, so it's critiquing forensic interviews, prepping individuals to testify and things of that sort. So that was the very first case. And I knew that I wanted to go to law school, but you know, sometimes you just wonder if that was like an emotional reaction to the really bad situation. And even through this case, I thought this is so, it was healthy for me. Some people were concerned because in this individual's case, I was sitting in the courtroom, picking a jury. It was kind of hard because, you know, whenever we stood up and the judge came in and the jury came in, and I knew how this person next to me felt. So it was very emotional. But it was, to me, it was a healthy way to deal with it because it was just dealing with it. That's kind of how I do things. So people were kind of worried about that. But after his case, we literally went to eat dinner with his family and we're celebrating. And everybody was crying and happy. But I kind of thought, and I really almost said like a little prayer. And I said, you know, I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. But if I'm not, then I get that too. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was why I went through all that to help this individual. And we were literally in there eating. I get a call. I answer the phone, which I normally don't do because I didn't know the number. And it was a New Jersey individual that said, Tonya, I need your help. Can you please help me? I've been falsely accused. And I literally felt like that was like an answer to a prayer because I was like, what do I do, God? You know, is this it? Have I helped? And then this is a good thing? Or do I keep going? So it was like, no, this is what I need to do. So then the cases just kept coming. People would show up at my house sometimes with things. So I kept consulting. And actually the case I was just down in Jacksonville on, the attorney on that first case that I worked on is the attorney I'm working with on this case. So I called him and said, I have another Florida case. Let's work on it together. So it's really been neat to build these relationships with attorneys in different states as well.
Fix your mic cord. Your cord.
Fix what? This?
Yeah. I didn't know if we could see it or not, so I'm just making
you know
sure.
What? I need to do this, and then we'll take care of that.
I don't want you to look at it and go, why didn't you tell me?
Be like, oh, there's
so, yeah.
I will say it's so hard to say the very first case after being sworn in because I was already working and consulting on cases, but then I just filed the appropriate motions to kind of transition from consulting on the case to litigating. So I was in the midst of all these cases. I will say one of the biggest cases like mine after I was sworn in was a little bit over a year ago, and it was a trial. It was going on for 5 years. And part of that, a little bit of that was COVID. There was a couple years because he was out on bond, and you know how the individuals that are out on bond don't, they kind of push them behind the people that were incarcerated during COVID to be able to, you know, not keep them in jail as long as. But there was a case, it was in Atlanta, and it was a father, and it was his two daughters. That's where the accusations came from. We know where they truly came from, which was the mother. There were years of parental alienation. I mean, it was a very long process, and it was that was a very, very scary thing because we knew that we had done everything we could do. And when I say we, Scott, which was one of my attorneys, you know, we work together on all these cases now. So we knew we did everything we could do. The trial was done very well, but you've got these people that are, you know, these 12 people sitting there looking at our guy. And honestly, and, you know, I kind of tell people like it is, he did not, I believe at all, or I wouldn't be helping him do what he was accused of doing. But he wasn't a very likable person. So,
Really?
Not at all. So, you know, we had to kind of explain to the jury, but also explain to him, I don't care if they like you, I care if they believe you. Because I don't really like you that much, but I believe you. So, it was a hard case. I remember whenever the jury came back in, you know, it's one of those that it doesn't matter if you have most facts are good on your side or they're good on the other side, you never know what a jury's going to do. And that was very, another kind of like just out-of-body, surreal, kind of weird experience because I'm standing up and he's standing next to me. And you have no idea what they're going to say. And he would have, it wasn't a life sentence per se, but it was 150 years, so it would have been a life sentence. And whenever they acquitted him, it was, you know, just really, we were all crying. I mean, it was just so emotional for him because I knew how he felt, but for the family that was behind us and that supported him, you know, it's just, it's not just dealing with facts and dealing with the litigation. It's dealing with people's emotions and people's lives. And that's why I do have to work out. Otherwise, I don't know how I would get through it. So there's a lot to it other than just kind of like focusing on the law.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about this particular case, and, you know, the jury walks in, everybody stands up, and there you are, and there's your client. You mentioned out-of-body experience. Did that take you back? When you're standing there with your client, you were in his shoes. Mm-hmm. Did it take you back?
The funny thing is, the first one that I consulted on, right after my acquittal, sitting in that courtroom, that took me back. Like, thinking about and feeling like I was back there again. Whenever it was the case in Atlanta, when we stood up and the jury came in, it didn't take me back, and I wasn't like feeling like I was back and it was my case and they were coming in. I just felt like, one, I felt like crazy gratitude that I'm here, and I'm here no matter what. But on the other hand, I felt this huge sadness because here's this person that he doesn't get to go home. So it was more of like, instead of taking me back, it was more of just understanding what he was going through his mind at that time. Because you have to stand there, and you have to stand there quietly, and you have to not, you know, you can have some emotions, but there are no outbursts. There are, you know, you don't say anything. So it was more like thinking about what was going through his mind.
And I've heard you say, we've talked, that you don't take a case, right? You have one, I mean, you are who you are, it is what it is. You talk to people, and if you think they're guilty, or you think, I mean, how do you decide? What's your gut?
I get that question all the time, which is a very, very legitimate and good question. So I'm going to break that up into like two answers.
Okay.
The first answer is, we do other types of cases at our firm also. So if it is any other type of case besides allegations of child abuse, we will sit down and talk to an individual. You know, we don't do these types of cases, but as an example, if it's an embezzlement case, we'll sit down and talk to somebody. And if the people that, you know, investigated didn't do their job, then, you know, we may take the case. If there is a child abuse case, which is usually what I work on, I will not take the case if I believe the person did it. So, like, I just got a call from Washington State, and I said, I need to not just Zoom with you, I need to sit down face to face, I need to talk to you, I need to ask you questions. And I've turned a lot of cases away. And it's hard. It's not hard for me. I'm not saying monetarily. I'm just saying I am trying to build a business, so there is a business aspect of it. But I've had situations where an individual called me and met with me, and she said, I want you to go talk to my brother. We have whatever you charge. We have money. We're good. I know that you only take cases you believe in, so our position is, if you're going to take the case, we will financially provide for his defense. If you will not take his case, then he's on his own and he can get a public defender. So they basically were saying, if you don't believe him, then we're not going to help him. And that's hard, because I did tell them, I was like, I am in no way all-knowing. I mean, I could not take it, but then maybe he didn't do it. I don't know. Or vice versa. You know, I mean, I could take something and believe somebody didn't do something and then later find out they did. But in this particular case, I spoke to the individual and I said, I'm not doing it. And, you know, they were very sad and upset, and I didn't give any more explanation, but they knew what that meant. And the individual, you know, I'm not saying, I mean, they're really good public defenders, but it's very heavy on me, because it puts a lot, it puts a lot of faith in me, but it puts a lot of responsibility on me too. And I, you know, want people to know that, you know, just because I choose not to take the case doesn't mean that they don't need to investigate it more and see if they believe their family member. It's just that I didn't believe them.
Did you follow up on that case to see how it ended?
It's still going on.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Everybody knows that if you don't believe the person, you don't take the case. And you mentioned that puts a lot of pressure on you, and that leads me to Pete Hughes.
Yes.
You still have that case?
Yes.
But you know him, so how are you handling it? What is your role in this case with him?
My role is one of his attorneys.
So are you the lead?
Scott, well, so because it's a Georgia case, Scott is lead attorney. And then what I do is, so I file a motion when I work in all these different states, have an attorney in that state, and it says they're in good standing, I'm in good standing, and I can work underneath the umbrella of their license. So on paper, lead counsel is always the person that's in that particular state. So Pete is in Georgia. So Scott and I are doing that. But I will say, if you ever met Scott and I don't think you can say either one of us are in control, but we both are in control. So we work together very well, and we've worked together since I started even consulting, so for 15 years. So we're kind of like brother and sister. So kind of fight like brother and sister, and we work together well like brother and sister. So, but I am a co-counsel, so right. Scott and I are working on that together, yes.
Why did you take that case?
I took the case because I believe he didn't do it. I 1,000% believe, and not just, here's one of the things with me too, because even my attorneys, during my case, if I would come and talk to them about an individual, let's say an individual that was on the other side, that was a witness for the prosecution, and I described the person, sometimes they would just kind of be like, okay, Tonya, you're emotional, you know, and I said, I'm telling you, I can kind of separate what I'm going through from this is this person's personality. So obviously I've known Pete for a very long time. I've known him since I was in high school. I've known his wife. I used to play softball with his wife.
Okay.
We used to go on trips together as families and things. And so it was kind of not surprising that they reached out because of the connections that we had in the personal connection. But I investigated it. I looked into it. I sat down with the detective that's on this case. I've sat down with Pete many, many times, and I totally believe in him and his innocence in this case.
And do you believe it because you've known him for so long?
No. I believe it because I've seen the information, I've seen what is being said, I've seen, because of the evidence, and that it speaks for itself, I guess you could say. I do know him, but I also am not easy on him. I mean, he has some faults, nothing to do with this, but nothing at all. But I have said, hey, in this area, you're a little, you know, you have a deficit, but that has nothing to do with this. I think that the initial, you know, call on the cell phone, very easy to get in touch with me, was from the personal relationship that we'd had. I hadn't seen him in years and years, and actually he was a coach at Baylor, and my best friend's a coach at Baylor. I mean, there were just a lot of connections. There are other things. I mean, unless you live every day next to an individual, you don't know everything about them. There are things in this case, there are things in every case that I work on, that you learn things about individuals that you didn't know, that makes them not quite so perfect. Everybody, including myself in my case. But nothing to do with these allegations. So I did not believe him just because we had that relationship. That I'm not going to say that meant nothing to me, but that meant nothing. My integrity and how I handle things in my business mean more to me than letting a relationship guide how I handle my business. If I felt like he did something, I would have, and could have, and have said this in the past to individuals. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to do anything on your case, but here's this attorney that's a really good attorney, and call this attorney, and I think they could do a good job for you. So I would do that. I would have done that for him if I felt like that he had done something and said, this is a good attorney you can use, but I'm not going to work on the case.
You still face naysayers.
Okay, well, when you say naysayers, do you mean people that don't believe, or people that are quite, like people that know me, or people that don't know me? Like, what do you mean by that?
People that think that you should have been
convicted.
Yes.
Okay. So that is probably, when you asked me at the beginning of the interview how you're doing, and I'm doing well and everything's great, and it is great for the most part. But then the fact that there's even one person that ever could think that I ever did anything inappropriate to any child, but especially my child, makes me, well, obviously very upset. And a lot of the individuals, they don't know the case. They probably don't even know me. They don't know the ins and outs or the facts. You know, there are a lot of people, and I probably was one of these before my case. There are a lot of people that will say, if a child says it, it must be true. And sadly, that's not the case in some situations. There are so many explanations. I mean, we work with the head of the child psychiatry department. We work with the head of the child psychiatry department at Vanderbilt. They're very qualified. They know what they're doing, and they see cases of false accusations a lot. So the fact that there's anybody that ever would think I would do anything to any child makes me sick. It makes me nauseous. But on the other hand, that's one thing that I have to have my emotions about sometimes and feel really sad, but then have to say, but there's a reason why I went through what I went through, and there are really good things happening. Now, I will say this. I welcome anybody that thinks I did to come to my office and sit down and talk to me and specifically ask me questions they want to ask me, and I will show them information and evidence in the case, and they can still have whatever opinion they want. But I will say this, the people that do think it, they don't come up to my face and say it. So, I mean, I don't mind talking about it, and I don't mind getting somebody to ask me the difficult questions about my case, but I would appreciate a little bit more if they would come and actually talk to me about this, or just look at the evidence and look at the information.
Right, which you've compiled.
Yeah, so I actually went and met with, or tried to meet with the GBI.
Right.
And with the FBI. And so I actually worked about 2 years and put together a PowerPoint on my case that is about 1,200 slides that breaks down every single interview, and everything that is in the PowerPoint is something that is documented. It's not an opinion or a thought. It's from a transcript, it's from a video, it's from an audio, it's from something. So I put together to just show individually how we got to where we got, how I went from a kindergarten teacher with my 2 children and happy and my dogs and my house to being accused of this. And so I compiled that, and I'll let anybody see it that wants to see it. So everybody has a right to feel the way that they feel. I would caution everybody, not just about me, but about anything, to kind of question yourself on how much you know and how much information you have before you have an opinion on something. I even do that with, I have family friends and family members and friends that will see a case and they'll call me, and say, it might be like a big case, right. A national case, and they'll say, well, did you see that? That prosecutor is awful, and and I'm like, no, that prosecutor is actually doing a very, very good job, and that defendant absolutely is a train wreck and needs to go to prison, based on what I've seen. So, it's not just, I don't just jump the gun, and I'm not just on one side and everybody's believable and everybody's wrongly accused, because there are a lot of people that aren't in all kinds of areas. But it's a difficult thing, because I have to answer these questions all the time. Like, I can be on a plane flying to wherever I'm flying to work on a case, and I talk to people. And so if they're open to it, I'm not one of those that, force you to talk. But if I have a conversation and somehow it comes up that I'm a lawyer or something, or they ask, and then they say, well, have you always been an attorney? I've had this happen several times, or more than a few. And they'll say, oh, have you always been a lawyer? And I'm like, no, I used to be like a teacher, a kindergarten teacher. And they're like, well, how in the world did you go from being a teacher to being a lawyer? And of course, you're sitting there and you're like, how do I answer that question? Like, how do you talk to a stranger and go, well, I was falsely accused of child molestation, and it was, it's awful. You don't know what to say. And so I've kind of come up with things now, and I'm like, I was a teacher, I love teaching. There was a really bad thing that happened. It was really sad, and that's what led me to the law. And you're more than welcome to Google it when I'm not around, and then you can draw your own opinion about it. Because it's just, it's still very difficult. When I go in these other states and I pro hoc in, then they'll Google me, and then I'll get motions filed against me a lot that basically, say, you can't mention your case, and you can't mention your, any of this stuff. and which I wouldn't anyway, because their case has nothing to do with my case. What the prosecutors say, and I've had a few say this in open court, is we don't want them, the jurors, to look her up and to think that she represents people that she thinks didn't do this, because that'll give her more credibility than she deserves. And of course, my answer, I don't say it directly to them because I just let the judge. My answer is, well, as a prosecutor, you're used to the one having that credibility when you walk in the door. You're the good guys. Defense attorneys are looked at as kind of the bad guys. So they don't like it when it's kind of more of an even playing field sometimes. So I've had to deal with judges asking me questions, and we have, these motions and stuff, and we have to make sure that my case isn't mentioned. Some of the different experts that we have written some articles and done things that, actually I've helped write some articles and some peer-reviewed, like for Thomas Reuters, Dr. Larondos and Dr. Aldridge, we've written 2 chapters, one in forensic interviews and one with the SANE examinations. So if that literature is listed in their CV, then they have to redact my name from being one of the authors. So it comes up a lot, but I don't know if I answered your question. That was a very long-winded way to answer your question.
You're fine. You're fine.
The prosecutors and the judge and the detectives and people like that, I've run into a lot of them because I've been in the courtroom and I've been in the jail. I went to the jail and I went and met with a client of mine, and I was standing on one side of the plexiglass that my attorney was standing on, and then my client was standing where I was standing. So that honestly probably took me back more than being in any courtroom ever had. That was probably the most difficult experience, even more so than being in the courtroom. So the individuals, let's see. Okay, well, we can kind of like check them off. So some of the people that were in a professional capacity, I've run into them some. Of course, my ex-husband, we are around each other a lot. We were definitely around each other a lot when the kids were still in school and stuff. Whenever I had the lawsuit, whenever I dismissed the lawsuit, I did dismiss it against my ex and his current wife with prejudice, because the lawsuit to me was it was unproductive. It was I had come to a place where I was really doing betterly with just emotionally, and it was taking me to a really bad place. It wasn't good for me. Some lawsuits are good. To me, I just felt, I truly to this day feel like if I'd continued with the lawsuit, even if I'd been completely successful, I would not be able to do the things that I'm doing today, that it would have taken me down a path of just anger and resentment, and it would not have let me heal. So, when I kind of decided to forgive, especially their father, one, I knew I couldn't say I forgave him and then be suing him for a lot of money. But he and I, we all go out to eat as a family. He and I just go eat and just chit chat about the kids sometimes. And so I see him, and then I see their stepmom, and so that I would qualify that. I would say a good relationship. It's definitely good compared to what it should be. And honestly, I work in a lot of custody and divorce cases. A lot of times there are some allegations that are thrown in there while they pull me in, but I do a lot of custody and divorce. And it kind of helps me, because I tell them, I'm like, look, if I can go to dinner with somebody that tried to put me in prison for something I didn't do, I think that you can be in a room without yelling at somebody. You know, so it does give me, that it actually helps give me a little bit of credibility too.
What about your daughter? She's all grown up.
Oh, so my daughter, so she is, I guess, well, people call her Little Tonya. So she has a personality that's kind of like mine. She is doing wonderful. She's fixing to graduate from college. She's doing great. During everything that was happening, and when I didn't get to see my kids, we had such a great relationship before all the allegations. And it was so fractured, I really never, ever thought that we would ever be able to get past that. And we're closer now than we ever were before. And we have a very strong relationship. My son and I have a very strong relationship. It's a miracle and it's a blessing. However, I try not to think about the lost time, because then that can take you down like an emotional, kind of an emotionally negative rabbit hole. But I remember walking through the house and there was a picture, and I saw the picture of the two kids. And this has been 5 or 6 years ago. And I thought about it, and I thought, when did they kind of have their hair? Like I don't really remember that. And then when I really thought about it, because my parents got to see them occasionally, I thought that was during those 2 years that I didn't get to see them. But it honestly like brought happy tears, because I didn't just automatically go to, oh, that's when I couldn't see them. It's almost like I didn't even remember that time a little bit. So they're doing very well. She calls me a lot, especially when her bank account's low. I'm just kidding. But we have a great relationship. One of the ladies that does our nails, we'll go get our toenails done together or something. She has little girls, and she'll always tell me, she's like, I hope that one day that my daughter and I, just talk and are friends like y'all are. And she said, I just love to listen to y'all and see your relationship. So it is wonderful. It is very good. But I wasn't sure it would ever get there. And that helps me in custody cases, and it helps me work on these situations where there's a fracture of the relationship and people just kind of want to give up and say, I'll never be able to, hug my child again, or never be able to have that interaction. So, so honestly, with the criminal case, that has kind of guided me a lot, obviously, in the cases I work on, mostly nationally. Locally, I do a lot of custody and divorces and dependency and neglect, and I do a lot of work with teachers. So when teachers have to deal with, oh, we don't know if you did anything wrong, but we're going to send you home with no pay, then they call me. So I do a lot of work with teachers, and most of those are not serious allegations. When I say serious, I mean it's not like the things that I was accused of. Some are, but most aren't. So I work a lot with teachers, and I'm a very strong advocate for teachers, and so I totally enjoy doing that. But with what I experienced from the custody side of it, it really helps me be either a mediator or a litigator on that type of case. And it helps me kind of hold my client's feet to the fire. Because kind of like with my other case, if I have a client, and I know they're my client, and I'm going to litigate for them, and I'm going to advocate for them, but if they are doing things that I think are harmful to their children, or they're trying to purposefully harm the relationship between the other parent and the child, I will tell them, I'm withdrawing, or you're going to change the way you do things. So I'm very adamant about that as well in custody cases. I don't want to work on cases where I feel like somebody's being damaging to the child or children.
Back to your daughter.
Again, I was going to say, one day, feel free to bring me back, because you can say, Tonya, I thought of something.
When you talked about your relationship with your daughter, how did you mend that? From the time that the case was over, and the time the custody visitation on families and all that, and how you got all that resolved. How, from that moment forward, how did you mend that to get it to where it is now?
So that is a very good question, and it's a complicated question also. I've had people that have kind of asked me, like, so y'all have been in intensive therapy, and we haven't. In fact, after what my daughter went through, very sadly, she's gotten older, and so we've talked about this, but she has a very, she's very hesitant of therapists, because she feels like I tried to tell them that nothing happened, and then this still happened. I didn't get to see you for all these years. So she's trying to reconcile those things in her mind. But I kind of took the position that the whole reason I fought the whole time was for my two kids.
Right.
And I wore a necklace with their pictures everywhere I went on them. They are the reason I fought. I think if it wasn't for them, I would just lay down and given up. But because of that, when it was over, and when we were back together, and they were back in my home and in our home, the first thing you want to do is just hold them and not let them go, and kiss their little forehead and tell them how much you love them. But also knew that both of them had gone through so much that they had to, I needed to let them handle it in the way that they felt like they needed to handle it. So I would tuck them into bed and sit at the end of the bed, and I would, you know, is it okay if I sit here? I would let them dictate anything, even if it's like, I would always tell them I love them, and like with my daughter, every night I would say I love you, and it was wonderful to be able to say that. But for a while it wasn't reciprocated, or it wasn't said back. And then one night she said I love you too, and of course when she said that there were tears, and she said, Mommy, you know I've always loved you, and I said I know. So it was very I just had to let it be in their time, and they couldn't feel forced, and I couldn't be like, you know, I love you, and this, you know, and we know this stuff wasn't true, but it was a lot for both of us. But and I didn't sit down and try to explain things to them. If they had questions, which they both did, I let them come to me and say, you know what, is this or this true? And I would answer the question honestly. There was a time when my daughter asked me a question about, she was very angry at Doc, which was my main attorney, which it's easy to be angry at Doc. I was very angry at Doc a lot of times. But he was the one that cross-examined her. And he asked her questions, you know, like, did you, you know, threaten to kill this person? Did you do this to this person? Did you do, and all the things he asked her about were things that these other individuals said, the main child, the main mom, the other child's mom, like, these were things that were in recorded statements. It wasn't just that, you know, triple hearsay. And so apparently she had gotten off the stand, and she was little then, but she still was a little spitfire. So she went down there and she was calling people out on it and saying, why, you know, why was this said and why was this said? And they were told, and she was told that I was a liar, and that everything that he asked were lies that I had told to my attorney, and that my attorneys and I both just made things up and were lying. And so my daughter asked me, and she said all those things, and she specifically remembered what they were, and she said, they weren't a lie, were they? And I said, they were not. And she said, these people said that. And I said, they did. And she said, something about, where did they say it? I said, you know, well, there were different things. There were things called depositions, and, you know, and there's transcripts. I said, if you ever want to see them, and she was like, I don't have to see them. She goes, I knew the answer to that, but I wanted to hear. So with things like that, I let her come to me. I've never sat her down and said, or my son, and said, look, I want to tell you about this that happened, and this person did this, and this person said that. I've never done that, but I've always been open to answering any questions. And specifically, you know, with my daughter, over the years, she'll just come out and ask things. She came out and she asked me one time, there are a lot of things that she's talked to me about that I think is kind of her place and her story whenever she, you know, when she wants to, if she ever wants to do that. But she would come and tell me things that the prosecutors and her father and stepmom took her into a room, and the stuff that they told her. And basically, from her description, is basically threatening an 8-year-old. And she said to me, and she said, you know what, based on what the exchange was, she said, I started crying. And they said to me, don't worry, you don't have to be scared of the evil one, because that's what they had all the kids call me, was the evil one. And they said, you don't have to be scared of the evil one. And my daughter said, Mommy, I wasn't scared of you, I was scared of them. And when stuff like that, of course there are tears, but then that's where the forgiveness is kind of like a cardio event. I have to forgive these people again, because I want to get in my car and I want to go say, hey, and don't you mess with my kids. That's not okay. But so, you know, she has shared some things that are very disturbing with some individuals down there that are judges now, that are still judges, and that, you know, that are detectives and things. And it's very upsetting, but I do feel like a few things. I feel like that she is so well. She is emotionally well. She is a much better 22-year-old than I was when I was 22. She has things put together. She's very put together. And at times when I would get refrustrated, even though I'm sure that's not a word, with some of these individuals, it would not help her for me to just play mama bear and get in my car and go tell them like it is. Or even when I see them at the courthouse to say anything. It's not the appropriate time or place. But I do feel like every individual knows what they did or didn't do, and they have to deal with what they did or didn't do. And that's why it's easy to forgive other people, because I can deal with what I did or didn't do. It's up to them to deal with what, what happened with them or what didn't happen with them. So, I mean, obviously I got in the car at some point and went to my parents' house because that's where everybody was. I don't really remember that ride. I don't remember anything about it. I remember being there and the media was everywhere and it was craziness. And then they had like a car waiting because then we, went to New York and we're on some of the different shows up there. It was kind of a blur. It was really, really weird. I think it's almost like I remember looking at that detective. I remember kind of being back at the house and all these questions being asked. And then I remember landing at the airport, and then this is like 1 a.m. or something, and everybody, the media, I think the media gets a bad rap. I think there are very negatives and there are very positives. So you have to do what you have to do. So everybody kind of wanted me on their show first, to say. So I had agreed to what I had agreed to, and one thing that I do is if I say it, I'm going to do it. And you can throw a bag of money in front of me. I don't care. I'm going to do what I said. But when I get there, all these media people, like from Oprah, like all these different places, they'd sent people, and they were waiting on me. And so then they like kind of swarm me, and they're like explaining why it would be so much better if I was on their, show first for me. And so Doc actually was with us, and he kind of like ushered him away. But I remember that, and I remember being at the hotel room finally and thinking, oh my gosh, I get to order what I want to eat. I never thought I was going to be able to do that again. And that's basically the spurts that I remember after. But I do remember that from the time they say there's a verdict until it's read, I remember every single second almost.
Why do you think your case was such a big deal?
Well, that's a good question. I think that the case got so out of control, or let's say, okay, I don't want to use your, because I don't think big deal. I don't like saying that about my case. Why it maybe got so much attention is, first of all, statistically and research-wise, people that do what I was accused of to small children, females just don't do that. I mean, it's like a, I forgot what the percentage we presented it. It was maybe a 1% of the population that are females that do that. Now you see the females that are, 30 and having an intimate relationship with a 15-year-old or something like that. You see that. But it just doesn't happen. It's not that, people don't hear about it. It doesn't happen. The other thing too is, I was a teacher. I think it was just, a local, and I was kind of like a typical soccer mom. I was a mom. I had 2 kids. I had the SUV. I had I was at the ball fields. I was a teacher. Kind of like who you wouldn't expect, I guess. And I really do think that the judge on my case, he had just become judge. This was his first case. In fact, now because I have become friends with some of the other judges and other individuals that have told me behind the scenes things that happened back then, it is my understanding that he was like, me, I want this case. And I think that he wanted it because I think that it was like, by goodness, I'm going to make a name for myself. And he made a name for himself, just I don't think the way that, he meant to. And I think with the prosecutors, I think when this got a little bit of attention, it turned into this, we're crusaders and we're going to take this terrible, and I know everybody thinks that she's sweet and that she's, not, when, like anything else, when we as a child think of these people that do bad things, we think of these monsters who look terrible, who you would, kind of run from if you saw them. And that was kind of their spiel was, I know she doesn't look like that, and I know she looks sweet, and I know she's a mom and a teacher, but we're putting her away because she's the evil one, as they were having the kids call me. So I think it got so far out of control so quickly, and there was no putting the toothpaste back in. And I really don't know why, but I do know that they're the ones that called the news, and they're the ones that wanted to be all over the news. And that's when I said, you're not going to put me up there and be talking about me and me not stand up and say, this is wrong and I didn't do it. My attorneys lost their mind when I said I was going to talk to the media before the trial. I mean, I said, I don't care. This is my case, but you're going to be there. I told my attorneys, because you're going to make sure that, I don't totally tank the case or anything. But I wasn't scared of being on there because I did not do anything. I had nothing to hide. I had not been perfect in my life. I've been married more than once. I've been married 3 times. I mean, there are things that are not perfect, but I didn't do this. And so if they wanted to, jump up and down and, we're going to put this terrible person away and she did these terrible things, I wasn't going to sit back and just take that. So I think that then catapulted it a little bit further because attorneys don't let their clients talk to the media before trial. But my attorneys don't let me do anything, and they'll tell you that. I wasn't this out of control person who was doing things that I wasn't doing things that were like crazy out of sync and that weren't making sense. I just wasn't going to sit back and let somebody else talk about me and me not say, hold on, I have something to say. So I think when that happened, then it kind of snowballed more. Then whenever they started to, because usually if I'm on a case and somebody's running their mouth on social media or on any media, I'm like, let them do it because we're going to use so much stuff against them, let them run their mouth. So then when they put the gag order on me, when I was in there with Kevin West, and we were literally in the studio and we were doing this interview, and they had been talking about this interview for weeks that I was going to be on there. So it wasn't a new thing. So the prosecutor, the judge, basically my attorneys got a signed gag order at like midnight. Nobody obviously was going to be in the office. This interview was when Jeff Styles had the early show. So, I mean, it was, 6 a.m., 5:30. It was very early. Mm-hmm. So I'm on there and I'm talking, and I think Scott was on there via telephone. And so we just start the interview, and they start in the room back there where all the equipment is, and they're doing their hands. And of course, everybody's like, what? What's going on here? So they went to a commercial, and they're like, there's a gag order. And an attorney that I had to have in Tennessee because of the custody thing, he was kind of there, and he's like, oh, we have to stop. And I said, no, I want to see it, because if it's a motion, then it doesn't mean I have to do anything. But it's an order signed by a judge, I will do it. And so we saw it, and it was an order. And so then this is what I think is so interesting. I think the fact that they wanted it to be on the media at first, to be like bashing me and to be this terrible thing. I think they thought, honestly, I don't know what they thought, but I think it was one of those, put it out there, I'm going to be destroyed, I'm going to just sit in the corner, I'm just going to give up, and they were going to, run over me. I think that's kind of what these individuals thought. Because I'm the type of a person, I like to be really friendly, and I don't cause conflict, or I don't set out to. But I'll deal with it if I need to. But I think a lot of these individuals had not seen that side of me. They'd only kind of seen laid back Tonya, who, is a teacher, and it's cool, and, let's all get along. So I think there was a little bit of underestimation there. But then it's kind of like all these things that they tried to do for bad eventually really was good for me. So the gag order, all of a sudden, if they had not done that, I would have been on that show for an hour. I'd have gone off that show, and then they'd have been talking about whatever they were talking about the next hour. Well, then all of a sudden, this gag order that's when kind of the national media got involved. Because then everybody's like, why are they trying to shut her up? If they think she's this terrible person, why do they not want her to talk where they can use it against her? So that is what kind of brought all the extra, the national, and all the media kind of attention into it. So, and then it just kind of snowballed completely from there.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not going to say, I didn't go to the media when this started, but after they put me everywhere and I was on, they were talking about it on every station, and I was in every newspaper and everything, I wasn't going to sit back and just take it. So I didn't start the media situation and the attention, but I definitely wasn't going to sit back and not say anything.
And now here we are, right? And you have said for several years that documentary, you wrote the book, but you had mentioned doing the documentary and a movie, and you've been to California. The first time you went, your daughter went with you, right? When you went with to meet a production company about doing a documentary on your life.
Yes, so we went, and she was, I don't remember how old she was, maybe middle school. Even with the book, you know, I talked to my kids and I said, you know, there's a book, I'm working on it. If you don't want me to do it, I won't do it, because I want them to have a say, because this happened to them too. It happened to the other kids too. I mean, it didn't just happen to me. And that's one of the things that I want people to know that I'm very aware of. It's not just this, poor me, this terrible thing happened. I mean, this terrible thing happened to a lot of people. So with the documentary, she went with me, and we were meeting with different production individuals to see which company we were going to go with. And so I asked her, I said, you know, do you want to be in the meetings? Do you not? And she's like, no, I want to be in there. This is our story. So she was asking, I think she was maybe in middle school. She was asking some very good questions. And of course, they were loving it, because, I mean, you know, here she is, you know, say, well, let me know how this is going to work, and how's this going to work? So she actually was part of the process in picking some individuals. So and that's the other thing with when you ask like how I've dealt with it with the kids and emotionally. I've talked to them when they want to talk about it. I've let them be involved, and they have a voice in all this, and they have a say in all this. So I've let them be as involved or uninvolved as they want to be. But I've also made them aware of everything that's going on way before it happens, and let them have a voice and a say in what does and doesn't happen.
And so where are you in the documentary? How
well,
far along?
So the funny thing is, like with the book, you know, you probably hear this a lot. You know, there will be a situation, even if it's not like as crazy as this one, and they'll say, I'm going to write a book. I'm like, well, it's not quite as easy as you think. The book took 6 years. It took a long time, and it was a process, and it was a process that educated me probably more than I wanted to be educated. But the documentary and the movie has taken it's taken a good while, and because of COVID, everything was shut down for a while, and then with the movie for a while, all the people that were the writers, they were on strike. So you know, you have these life things that happen too. The documentary was initially going to come out first. That one has it's going on, but now we think the movie is going to come out. So I went recently to California. Met with the individuals and got the final script. So we're going through the final script now, and then after that is when, now that the final script is fixing to get approved, then that's when everything's going to start going fast. That has been a process. We had a script writer right before COVID. COVID happened. Everything was shut down. Things got better as far as COVID goes, and then we started on it again. Then the individual that we had chosen after interviewing that was going to write the script got very ill and wasn't able to do anymore. So then we started the process all over again, picking somebody. So, but it's one of those things where I think the movie is important. I think the documentary is important. I think the book is important. Not to tell my story or not to have sympathy or anything, but because this is something that happens a lot more than what people think it happens. And it's wrong. And again, I think, like these children, if they're false allegations, they wouldn't even have to testify and go through that experience if the individuals that were supposed to get it right got it right in the first place and investigated properly and looked into it. So it wouldn't even get to that point. So I think it is something that everybody's scared to talk about. And I do think that God did allow me to go through this for a reason, even though I have a big question about that. I would prefer for him not to let me into this. But I think it is something that needs to be addressed. And you know, now that everything's kind of progressing more quickly, it looks like the movie is going to occur prior to the documentary. So, but we've done a lot of filming. Well, with the movie we haven't done filming yet, but with the script and the things that we've had with that. The documentary, we've already done a lot of filming. We've done filming out in Chickamauga. We've done filming here. They came and filmed when I was sworn in. So we have a lot of video at the trial, but since the trial as well. So, and these documentaries, how sometimes when you see them on TV and they're 10, 15 years in the making. So, but I would rather it take longer and then be done properly or just not be done at all. Because even with the book, there was an issue with the first publishing company. So my agent, you know, he kind of called and said, oh, we need to give in to this because they're, and I was like, no. And so then they were trying to make it to where if I didn't, then they were just going to basically kind of hold my book hostage for a very long period of time and the book wouldn't get written. And I said, then it won't get written. I don't care. We're not doing things this way. I want them to be done correctly. So we ended up spending about a year and we negotiated and it was fine and it worked out. But it's not just about doing a movie or writing the book. It's about talking about something that everybody's scared to talk about. And maybe if we talk about it a little bit more, maybe things can improve and people can make some changes. Because I think when you have a case like mine where it did not happen, I think it hurts, especially as much attention as it got. I think it hurts cases where kids are abused. It might stop a child from coming forward. It might, you know, cause a prosecutor not to prosecute a case somewhere else, you know, that it really did happen. So that's why I think it's so important to just not just willy-nilly do these cases and just, you know, and look into, you know, sadly, children can say things and talk about things that aren't true. It doesn't mean that these children are liars. It doesn't mean that they're malicious or bad at all. You know, it means that for some reason we get from point A to point B and we have to logically look at this instead of emotionally look at this. So I'm hoping, I mean, my goal, if I live the end of my life in either the book or the movie or documentary or anything I do, if it helps 3 prosecutors or 3 defense attorneys or 3 detectives do things a little differently and, you know, and kind of think about it, then to me, that's a huge win. So that's my goal, is just, you know, it's like with teaching and why I love teaching and loved educating. I think it's kind of the same thing. It's educating people on a topic that is really not fun to talk about. I don't like talking about it, I mean, at all, but I either had a choice to either pretend like it didn't happen when it's everywhere, or just deal with it head on, and that's what I chose to do.
And I want to say that it was someone at church who said to your mom, how's our girl? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
And so that question now is?
Well, the sweetest thing is the person that asked that it was actually one of my mom's best friends. She came up and she did say, how's our girl? It was one of my jurors. And that means the absolute world to me. I have a different juror that posted this thing. She's older, a lot more mature now. And she posted something, I can't, it was her birthday or something, and she posted this thing that said, that this is her age and she's not getting any younger. I'm very much ad-libbing, but, and how much of a blessing it was to have been on my case, and that she's so happy to see me and the kids are doing well and that she loves me. And I mean, stuff like that, again, are things that I go back to when I have those down days, because, I mean, this juror didn't know me. Really, I mean, we've spoken some since then, but we have a very strong connection, and I really appreciate, because she saw it. She heard the kids. She heard everything. She saw everything, and that means a lot.
How are you now? After this interview, are you okay?
Oh, I'm good. Yes. So I'm doing very well. Again, that's the biggest thing, especially even in the middle of it. People would be scared to come up and go, oh, hey, Tonya, how are you doing? Because I would maybe start crying a lot of times and say, I'm not doing well. Like, I can't see my kids. I'm sorry, I'm crying. And so nobody really wanted to ask me anything because they're scared I might cry. And I would say, listen, I'm going to cry because this is a crying situation. This is appropriate, and I don't feel bad about it. So, because a lot of times growing up, maybe even especially in the South, I don't know, but we're kind of taught, like as female, we're kind of taught like hide our emotions a little bit, and maybe not, have it out there all the time. And I was one that I'm not a big crier. So the fact that this helped me become really okay with having those emotions is good. So tears don't mean that I'm hurt or happy or whatever, tears are tears. But I'm doing very well. So I appreciate my children. I appreciate this business, and we're growing this business. We're hiring some new individuals. You know, we're expanding. We're working on wills and trusts and other types of cases. So things are progressing, and they're progressing the way that they're supposed to. That's the one thing I've become comfortable with the business, with the movie, with the book. If it's supposed to happen, it will happen. And it may not be in the time frame that I want it to, but that's okay. So I've gotten very patient with not putting things in a box as far as time frame goes.
And you showed me a magazine before we came in. You said you're a diamond?
Oh, no, it just said I was gold. I'm just kidding. No, there was I'm supposed to be. When I fly, because I fly so much. So, so Cityscope did I guess it was the 30, I think it said 30 influential business owners or something in Chattanooga. And so they had put me in there, and that was very humbling and very, I'm very proud of that. Not proud like, oh, that's me, but proud to know that at one point I would have never thought that I'd be sitting here today. And I appreciate it very much. So when I get emotional about that, it's not because I'm sad about it. It's because I'm very appreciative and humbled by where I'm sitting today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for watching News Channel 9, and for more great local coverage, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. News Channel 9, depend on us.